Welcome back to another edition of Force Friday, where we talk about Star Wars theories, characters, concepts, comparisons, analyzations, collectibles, and more. And today we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite Star Wars 3 3/4 line, the Vintage Collection. For a lot of this video, I'm just going to show some footage of my 3 3/4 collection as we discuss this stuff, and obviously we'll break it up with some pictures and video as it's appropriate. Since its debut in the summer of 2010, with the wave dedicated exclusively to the 30th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back, Hasbro's The Vintage Collection has become widely considered the greatest Star Wars action figure line of all time. But all good things must come to an end, and much like the rose, one day it withered on the vine. And at SDCC 2012, Hasbro announced that the Vintage Collection would be going on hiatus for 2 years, with the plan being for it to return in 2015 to coincide with the then planned 3D release of A New Hope. Rising oil costs combined with waning interest in the Star Wars brand had combined to bring more expensive figures with fewer sales. And while Hasbro tried to continue the line's high standard with the Black Series 3 3/4 in 2013 through 15, the quality severely declined. It also created brand confusion between the two lines. At Celebration Orlando in 2017, Hasbro announced to massive fanfare the Vintage Collection would be returning to store shelves the following year. The numbering would continue, with Rey from The Force Awakens as the first figure at VC 116. The hype train was rolling, and fans were excited to get their hands on brand new, super articulated Star Wars figures in the classic scale. But the question is, was it too good to be true? The street date was April 13th, 2018 for the first wave of the relaunched Vintage Collection, and it disappointed many. It consisted of 6 figures, mostly from New Entertainment, and 5 were straight repacks. Hasbro had produced a limited number of super articulated figures from the new movies as Walmart exclusives in the prior 2 years, and instead of peppering them into the line naturally, Hasbro filled an entire first wave with them and only one new figure, your old pal Snoke. Snooky McSnookerson. The first wave of any action figure line is crucial. It has to be a success. High sales result in retailers ordering more. It then gives a line more shelf space. It gives Hasbro more money and collectors more stuff. It's the reason any first wave of a Transformers line usually has Optimus Prime. And in that sense, Rey and Kylo Ren were no-brainers, being the face of the franchise at the time. But this wave was a critical misstep and peg worms to this day. I've even seen them clearance out for like $5 to $7. The next 2 figures in the line, 122 Rey and 123 Min Ban Stormtrooper, were Walmart exclusives and didn't hit retail until almost a year later, with Rey even jumping from Walmart to Entertainment Earth, but they were at least new. The second wave hit around August 2018 and featured 2 all-new figures, Young Han Solo and Enfys Nest, 1 retool in the Imperial Tank Driver and 1 repack in the Death Trooper. Later, Wave 3 had 2 straight repacks and 2 new figures. While a better ratio of new to old, Hasbro had next to no original trilogy figures for the Vintage Collection throughout the entire year of 2018. They're bread and butter of this line in its heyday, and figures from that first year continue to pegworm to this day. All in all, while new figures were of excellent quality, there were too few of them, and the relaunch was a massive disappointment. And unfortunately, this feeling has largely continued. While we have gotten several long-requested updates to characters and a greater original trilogy focus, the line is still plagued with wave after wave of too many repacks and not enough new figures. It's important here for Hasbro to realize the significance of the original trilogy, specifically in regards to this line. The Black Series draws collectors from all aspects of Star Wars because it appeals to the age bracket, but the smaller figures just don't appeal to the age bracket anymore. So the majority of people that I see that are highly obsessed with the 3 3/4 line are your original trilogy guys, the guys that grew up with 3 3/4 figures. That's why it means something to them. That's why it has similar packaging to the originals. That's why it's called the Vintage Collection, because it attracts the vintage collector. So not focusing on the original trilogy, on the vintage movies, is a massive misstep. But let's talk about them. The quality. One thing that has been there among the new figures we do get is quality. At this point, Hasbro has really hit their absolute highest peak in every execution for this scale. Paint, articulation, accessories, figures like Yak Face or the new Stormtrooper sculpt are really absolutely fantastic, and the best versions Hasbro has ever produced by far. Improvements can be made, but we're going to get back to that in a minute. The point is, it's not the main issue. Let's play the numbers, and let's look at the facts and the figures. The Vintage Collection has put out several pack-ins with vehicles and multi-packs, as well as the main line, and these numbers combine all of those. Since the line has returned, Hasbro has released 20 all-new figures, with at least 4 more leaked for a total of 24 all-new figures that have released and that we know about. They have released 9 retools using existing parts to make new characters, with 5 more upcoming retools known about, for a total of 14 retooled figures released or to be released. They have straight repacked 28 figures across waves alongside new figures with playsets and as full repack waves. Hasbro has made no secret of regarding the Vintage Collection as secondary. They have publicly called Black Series their bread and butter line. Rising oil prices, increased labor costs, higher parts count, and inflation have meant that the production price per figure on Hasbro's part isn't much higher for a Black Series 6-inch figure than a Vintage Collection 3 3/4, and that goes both for production and for the initial tooling. But a 6-inch figure can sell significantly higher than its smaller cousin for a much greater profit margin. And in the very high Star Wars license fee, it's not hard to see why Hasbro is putting their full effort into the 6-inch line. Despite these issues, credit must be given where it's due. Dioramas like the Jabba's Palace Adventure Set are something fans have wanted for a long time and have sold fairly well for a reasonable price. Vehicles like the Imperial Combat Assault Tank, the Desert Skiff, the Imperial Troop Transport are all expensive, but without a doubt, some of the finest vehicles Hasbro has ever done for their Star Wars line. Paint has never been spared during this relaunch. Sculpt has never been spared during this relaunch. The new stuff we do get is pretty high quality, but there isn't enough of it, and there isn't enough of it that's actually exciting. Now, this has caused a number of concerns. Frustration among the fans, I'm sure frustration on Hasbro's part with lack of sales, and recently we've seen the fight for the Vintage Collection take to social media. With fans' frustration building for a long time, the hashtag #FightForTVC began circulating around various sites a few weeks ago, with fans campaigning to keep the line alive and get more characters and new figures. A Change.org petition asking Hasbro to produce more new Vintage Collection figures has hit over 8,000 signatures and counting. God, I hate a petition. But that's besides the point. It shows that people are interested. Websites from all across the Star Wars fandom have began singing the same song and asking for changes in the line. The market has changed. 6-inch is the new standard for everything, not just Star Wars, and we all know we're never going back to the glory days of 63 3/4 figures a year. But even with this in mind, things can and should be handled a whole lot better. The recent live stream on the Hasbro Pulse Facebook group basically demonstrates the problems fans have. We know that the line is going to continue through at least 2021. We got another HasLab project teased and a carbon freezing chamber diorama. The line isn't going anywhere anytime soon. We saw 2 reveals, Chirrut that we knew was coming, and Bespin Leia, which is a retool of an outdated mold. Just look at them hips. They don't lie. Not a bit. Hasbro acknowledged the fan support recently and said it's been taken into account, but said to expect a full 180 on the line's approach. It would be surprising to see what that meant if they continued with the super hyper articulated line. It was just another boring set of reveals by and large. Why not show us even one of the figures from the wave we know is coming, like 5s? Give us a tease. Create some excitement. Blow some smoke our way. Get us riled up and stirred up. It's easy. But I don't like talking about problems without solutions. So let's talk about some of the things they could do. It goes without saying Black Series is now the big mass market Star Wars line. That's the way it is. That's the way the market is. The average Joe looking for a Darth Vader is far more likely to go for the 6-inch than the 3 3/4. It's better value, it's bigger, it's more easily available. So Hasbro needs to satisfy the existing core audience they have for the line. Most collectors of the Vintage Collection are longtime fans, invested deep into the line. And while characters from all eras should be represented, the original trilogy of Star Wars is the golden child for this line and should remain the core focus for this line. Completing the original Kenner figures is a long-time goal for many fans. And while the recently revealed Power Droid shows Hasbro is aware of this, it's a slow process. There's so many obscure characters that are needed. The Imperial Dignitary should be peppered in alongside surefire heavy hitters to ensure they don't peg warm and get them to fans who want them. There's core characters missing, definitive versions, A New Hope Han, Luke and Leia, Ben Kenobi, the Emperor from Return of the Jedi. These are fan favorite classic characters that will not sit on the pegs, but you have no hope of moving anything else if you're not releasing them peppered within. What else should they do? How about consider the fan favorites? While the original trilogy is the goose that never stops giving, there are other eras of Star Wars with a niche but dedicated audience who will buy if Hasbro caters. Fan favorite films like Rogue One do well, but only if Hasbro gives them the right characters. Admiral Raddus, Director Krennic, Baze Malbus, Saw Gerrera, Darth Vader, these could do extremely well as they sit alongside the core original trilogy era. Similarly, The Mandalorian is massively popular, and debuting some characters as action figures in this scale before Black Series, like they did with Crate Luke, could give the line a big boost in popularity. Another era that Hasbro could make serious cash on is the Clone Wars. The original animated line went out with a whimper, leaving fans devoid of many needed characters. The upcoming Clone Trooper 5s and Commander Wolf shows that Hasbro is aware of this. If Hasbro were to pepper more Clone Wars characters evenly through the line alongside original trilogy and fan favorite era figures, they would have another niche of collectors to tap into. How about a Bounty Hunter Asajj Ventress? Pre-Vizsla, I think they would do well. But we got to talk about these case assortments. Repacks are going to be part of any line. Repacks of rare and hard to find figures from the original run of the vintage collection are welcome and give fans new and old a chance to acquire those figures. But Hasbro's handling of repacks in this line has been absolutely abysmal. We've had entire waves with maybe one new figure and entirely repacked figures alongside it. Not only that, but the majority of repacks were from recently released Walmart exclusives that weren't that hard to find originally, and they're still easy to get, so why release them? Then there's the sequel trilogy. Star Wars has no shortage of divisive eras, and while all eras should be represented in this line, too much attention has been paid to the sequels. The wave with the most new figures was for The Rise of Skywalker, and it released alongside countless other pieces of merch for that movie. The vintage collection is niche. It's not mainstream. It's expensive. And with all of those things taken into account, waves like this will just get lost in the shuffle. If Hasbro was pumping out waves mostly consisting of prequel or animated characters, the issue would be the same. Hasbro needs to find an even spread to maximize sales and prevent peg warming. Focus on the original trilogy with 2 or 3 figures per wave from other eras. Prequels, sequels, animated, or stuff like The Mandalorian. But as you guys have heard from my recent videos, there needs to be an engineering change as well. The vintage collection figures typically feature an extremely high level of articulation and engineering. Hasbro has reached the peak of a system they have been using since 2010. Unfortunately, however, such a system has its limits, and this articulation system has reached its. Figures using a ball hinge hip system that, while functional to a degree, is clumsy, frustrating to use, and doesn't always look good or natural. It basically consists of a swivel hinge swivel, or a poor man's universal, where you have to turn the hip sideways or forward to articulate it. This can be annoying at rare times with the 6-inch figures. It's downright obnoxious and aggravating at this size. It's just not possible to make it work, not in any smooth capacity. Similarly, ankles are still incapable of rocking and laying flat on the ground in a spread leg stance. It completely and utterly destroys any suspension of disbelief when characters are in dynamic poses sitting on the inside of their ankles. Hasbro can solve this with a ball joint. We've seen them do it with the 3 3/4 Marvel stuff. They could also solve the hip problem with a ball joint, which we've seen them do with the Marvel 3 3/4 stuff as well. Hasbro's done it before. I'm not sure what the holdup is this go round. I do think the line is worth saving. There's no denying it's unlikely that 3 3/4 will ever be what it once was. Hasbro said this themselves in their recent live stream. We all know the market for toys in general has changed dramatically, but Hasbro simply is not capitalizing on what they have here. It isn't enough to put out repacks to test the waters and see if the demand is there. You're not testing the right water. Nobody is gonna bite if you try and sell them the same thing they already have at a higher price point. If your waves of 4 figures have maybe 2 new ones, almost 50% of your assortment is going to sell sluggishly. Hasbro, get a handle on the repacks. Give us more new figures of characters we want from eras and movies that have the broadest appeal. Update the engineering, make the figures better, and your sales more money. If you put the work in, the figures will sell. This is a legacy line. A legacy line that resides on the shoulders of a benchmark era of the original trilogy. The overall abundance of this line should remain focused around the original trilogy, with the outer rim, so to speak, of the line picking up the prequel, sequel, and spin-off elements. This will engage possibly new collectors and satisfy people like me that love it all. The 3 3/4 Star Wars figure is more than just that. It's a legacy. It's what brought most of us to the collecting table. It's a tradition that encompasses the movies with the vehicles, with a broad broad scope of the world they live in and the ability to create entire scenes completely fleshed out from the small droid in the corner to Luke Skywalker at the front. If you want the legacy to continue, you have to remember what that legacy is. Hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are staying sane. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.